The morning of my father's funeral, I heard my stepmother tell her kids they'd inherit everything because I was adopted. I stayed quiet. At the will reading, she smiled until the attorney mentioned my biological father left me $45 million. Then she started screaming. I was standing in the upstairs hallway of my father's house at 6:43 a.m., holding a black suit on a hanger and a pair of dress shoes I'd polished the night before, when I heard Diane's voice drift up from the kitchen below. She was talking to her children, my stepbrother Kyle and stepsister Natalie, in that conspiratorial tone people use when they think they're alone. The house was a sprawling colonial in Westchester County, New York, the kind with hardwood floors that telegraphed every footstep, which meant they had no idea I was already awake and moving through the second floor. I froze at the top of the stairs, one hand on the banister, as Diane said, "Remember, today you need to look appropriately sad. Thomas was good to us, but let's not pretend this isn't the beginning of our real lives." Kyle laughed, the sound harsh and entitled. "How much do you think the estate is worth? 3 million? 5? Diane's response made my blood go cold. The house alone is worth $2.8 million. His investment portfolio is at least another $4 million. The life insurance policy is $2 million, plus his retirement accounts, the vacation property in the Hamptons, the art collection. I'd estimate we're looking at somewhere between 12 and 15 million, conservatively." Natalie's voice, always whiny, always grasping. "What about Alex? Doesn't he get anything?" The pause that followed felt like falling. Then Diane said, voice flat and certain, "Alex was adopted. Thomas never legally finalized the inheritance paperwork for him. I made sure of that. His biological parents were nobodies, drug addicts who died when he was 6. Thomas felt sorry for him, that's all. Pity isn't the same as family." My hand tightened on the banister until my knuckles went white. Kyle said, "So we get everything?" Diane replied, "Everything. The lawyers confirmed it last month. I had them review Thomas's will 3 times. Alex isn't mentioned as a primary beneficiary. He'll get some token amount, maybe $50,000 if we're feeling generous, but the bulk of the estate passes to me as the surviving spouse, and then to you two as my biological children." I heard the clink of coffee cups, the scrape of chairs. My stepmother continued, "Today, you play the part. You're grieving stepchildren who love Thomas. You're devastated by the loss. At the will reading on Friday, you look somber and respectful. And when it's all finalized, we sell this monstrosity, split the proceeds, and you two can finally live the lives you deserve." My name is Alex Harmon. I'm 31 years old. My father, Thomas Harmon, died of a heart attack 4 days ago while playing tennis at his club. He was 63, seemingly healthy, and had just beaten his partner in straight sets before he collapsed on the court. The doctors said it was massive and instantaneous. He didn't suffer. That's what they told me when I arrived at the hospital. Too late to say goodbye. Too late to tell him I loved him one more time. I'd been living in Boston for the past 8 years, working as a forensic accountant for a firm that specialized in fraud detection and asset recovery. My job was finding money people tried to hide, tracing financial trails through shell corporations and offshore accounts, uncovering the truth buried in spreadsheets and tax returns. I was exceptionally good at it. Made partner at 29, pulled down $340,000 a year plus bonuses, lived in a modest 2-bedroom in Cambridge because I'd learned early that displaying wealth made you a target. Thomas had adopted me when I was 7 years old, a year after my biological parents died in a car accident that I barely remembered. I'd been in foster care for 8 months when Thomas, then a widower whose first wife had died of cancer, decided he wanted to give a child a second chance. He'd seen my case file through a colleague who worked in family services, read about a quiet kid who tested gifted but was struggling in the system. He met me on a cold afternoon in November 1999, brought me hot chocolate, asked me about my favorite books. 3 months later, I moved into his house. For the first time since my parents died, I had stability. Thomas wasn't warm or demonstrative. He was a corporate attorney who worked 70-hour weeks and measured success in billable hours, but he was consistent. He made sure I had everything I needed: good schools, tutors, college fund, support. He came to my high school graduation, paid for MIT, called me every Sunday night during my freshman year to make sure I was eating properly and managing my coursework. He loved me in the careful, deliberate way men of his generation showed love. Through action, through provision, through showing up. Then, when I was 19 and home for winter break during my sophomore year, Thomas introduced me to Diane. She was 42, a decade younger than him, recently divorced with 2 teenagers, Kyle, 16, and Natalie, 14. Diane was attractive in that calculated way: blonde highlights, gym-toned body, expensive clothes that looked effortless but cost a fortune. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, made decent money, and had an ability to make Thomas laugh that I hadn't seen since his first wife died. They married 8 months later in a small ceremony at the country club. I was 20, already back at school, and I attended the wedding during a long weekend, wearing a suit Thomas had bought me, smiling for photos, trying to be happy for him. Diane moved into the house with her kids. Suddenly, the home I'd known for 12 years became crowded with new people, new dynamics, new hierarchies I didn't understand. Kyle immediately claimed the bedroom I used during breaks, forcing me into the smaller guest room. Natalie took over the study where I used to do homework during visits. Diane redecorated everything, erasing the quiet, understated elegance Thomas's first wife had created and replacing it with aggressive modernity. White furniture, glass tables, abstract art that cost thousands and meant nothing. I told myself it was fine. I was barely home anyway. MIT, then grad school, then my career in Boston. I saw Thomas maybe 4 times a year. Thanksgiving, Christmas, his birthday in June, and occasionally a weekend visit when work brought me to New York. But each time I came home, I felt more like a guest than a son. Diane would greet me with air kisses and comments about how thin I looked or how I needed a girlfriend. Kyle, now a 28-year-old perpetual graduate student studying philosophy at NYU on Thomas's dime, would barely acknowledge me beyond a head nod before disappearing to his room. Natalie, 26, and working as a social media manager for a boutique marketing firm, would monopolize dinner conversations with stories about her job, her boyfriend, her apartment in Brooklyn that Thomas helped finance. I would sit quietly, eating carefully prepared meals from the housekeeper Thomas employed, listening to Diane talk about their latest vacation or renovation project, feeling Thomas's attention drift toward his new family, his blended family, the family that lived with him every day instead of calling once a week from another state. But I never doubted that Thomas loved me. He still called every Sunday, still asked about my work, my life, my goals, still transferred money into my account when I graduated, a gift of $50,000 to help me start my career, still introduced me as my son Alex at country club events when I visited, still kept photos of me on his desk, my MIT graduation, my partnership announcement, a candid shot from a camping trip we'd taken when I was 12. So when the hospital called me at 3:17 a.m. on a Friday morning to tell me Thomas was dead, I drove straight through from Boston to New York, arriving at the hospital at 6:45 a.m. to find Diane, Kyle, and Natalie already there, sitting in the family waiting room looking shell-shocked and red-eyed. Diane had hugged me, her Chanel perfume overwhelming, her body trembling against mine. Kyle had gripped my shoulder in what might have been sympathy. Natalie had cried into my chest. We'd sat together for 2 hours while the hospital staff walked us through paperwork, belongings, arrangements. Diane had asked me to stay at the house for the funeral planning. "It's what Thomas would want," she'd said. "All of us together during this difficult time." I'd agreed because she was right. It's what Thomas would have wanted. So I'd been staying in the guest room, the small one that used to be mine, for 4 days. Helping with funeral arrangements, contacting Thomas's colleagues and friends, writing the obituary that would run in the Times, organizing the service scheduled for later today at St. Patrick's Cathedral, being useful, being the good son. And now, standing at the top of the stairs with my funeral suit in hand, I just heard my stepmother and her children discuss how they were going to inherit everything that my father built while I received nothing because I was adopted, because Thomas had felt sorry for me, because pity wasn't family. The rage that swept through me was white-hot and clarifying. I'd spent 24 years trying to earn my place in Thomas's life, trying to be worthy of the second chance he'd given me, trying to prove that chosen family could be as real as biological family. And Diane had been working behind the scenes to ensure I was written out of that family the moment Thomas died. I walked silently back to my room, closed the door, and sat on the bed. My hands were shaking. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app, the same one I used for work when I needed to record client conversations or document evidence. Then I walked back to the hallway, positioned myself at the top of the stairs where I could hear clearly, and started recording. For the next 18 minutes, I captured everything. Diane's voice outlining the estate value. The lawyers said the total is closer to $14 million once you factor in all the assets. Kyle asking about timeline. How long before we can access the funds? Diane responding. Probate typically takes 6 to 8 months in New York, but I've already retained Gerard Whitmore from Whitmore and Associates. He's the best estate attorney in the state. He'll expedite everything. Natalie, always worried about appearances. What if Alex contests the will? Diane's laugh, cold and confident. On what grounds? He has no legal standing. Thomas adopted him out of charity, not love. There's a difference. The courts will see that. I stopped recording at 7:02 a.m., saved the file to 3 different cloud storage accounts, and emailed a copy to myself with the subject line, Evidence Estate Fraud. Then I got dressed for my father's funeral, the service at St. Patrick's was everything Thomas would have wanted, dignified, well-attended, traditionally Catholic. 300 people filled the cathedral, colleagues from his law firm, clients he'd represented for decades, friends from the country club, distant relatives I'd met maybe twice. I sat in the front pew next to Diane, who wore a black Armani suit and dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief at appropriate moments. Kyle and Natalie sat beside her, looking appropriately solemn. I wore my black suit, a white shirt, a tie Thomas had given me for my 30th birthday, and a face that revealed nothing. During the eulogy, one of Thomas's law partners spoke about his integrity, his dedication, his love for his family. Thomas often talked about his son Alex, the partner said, looking directly at me. He was so proud of what you'd accomplished, Alex. He said you were the smartest person he'd ever met, and that adopting you was the best decision he'd made in his entire life. I felt Diane stiffen beside me. After the service, during the reception at the country club, I played my part perfectly. Shook hands with Thomas's colleagues, accepted condolences, thanked people for coming. Diane circulated through the room like a politician, accepting sympathy, talking about how devastated the family was, how they'd need time to heal. Kyle stood by the bar, drinking scotch and looking bored. Natalie clustered with her friends, taking selfies in the bathroom that she probably thought were tasteful grief documentation, but looked like narcissistic performance art. At 4:30 p.m., I approached Diane near the buffet table. "I'm heading back to Boston tomorrow," I said quietly. "I need to get back to work." She looked relieved. "Of course. You've been such a help, Alex. Thomas would be grateful." "The will reading is Friday?" "Yes, 10 a.m. at Gerard Whitmore's office in Manhattan. You'll be there?" "Absolutely." She smiled and it didn't reach her eyes. "Good. It'll be quick. Just formalities." I drove back to Boston that night, arriving at my apartment at 11:47 p.m. The first thing I did was call my own attorney, Linda Kowalski, founding partner at Kowalski & Reed, 26 years practicing estate law, the woman who'd helped me structure my own investments and advise high-net-worth clients on asset protection. Linda answered on the third ring, her voice alert despite the late hour. "Alex, I heard about Thomas. I'm so sorry." "Thank you. Linda, I need your help with something, and I need complete confidentiality." "Of course. What's going on?" I told her everything. The conversation I'd overheard, the recording I'd made, Diane's plan to cut me out of the estate, the will reading scheduled for Friday. Linda was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Alex, do you have a copy of Thomas's will?" "No. Diane has it with her attorney." "Do you know if Thomas had any other legal documents? Trusts, codicils, amendments to the will?" "I don't know. He never discussed it with me." Linda's voice sharpened. "Here's what you need to understand. In New York, adopted children have the same inheritance rights as biological children, unless they're explicitly excluded from the will. If Thomas's will doesn't specifically disinherit you, Diane can't just cut you out because you're adopted. That's not how estate law works." She said her lawyer confirmed it 3 times. Then either she's lying, or her lawyer is incompetent, or there's something in Thomas's will that explicitly excludes you. I need to see that document. I can request a copy from the probate court after it's filed. That'll take too long. The reading is Friday. You need leverage before then. What kind of leverage? Linda paused. Alex, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to think very carefully before you answer. Did Thomas ever mention your biological parents to you? Anything about their backgrounds, their families, their assets? The question caught me off guard. No. I was 6 when they died. I barely remember them. Do you have any documentation about them? Birth certificates? Death certificates? Anything? I have a file Thomas gave me when I turned 18. Copies of my original birth certificate, my adoption papers, news clippings about the accident. Why? Because sometimes there are assets from biological parents that don't get discovered until years later. Unclaimed bank accounts, life insurance policies, inheritances from grandparents. It's a long shot, but if your biological family had any assets, they would pass to you as the sole heir, and that would give you financial independence from whatever happens with Thomas's estate. I thought about the file, buried in my desk drawer in Boston. I'd looked at it maybe 3 times in 13 years. I'll go through it tonight. Do that. And Alex, don't tell Diane or her children anything. Don't tip your hand. Go to the will reading. Listen to everything. Don't react. Let them show you what they're planning. Then we'll know what we're dealing with. Understood. Call me after you've gone through that file, no matter what time. I hung up and pulled out the folder. It was a plain manila envelope, worn at the edges, containing documents I'd barely processed as an 18-year-old. My original birth certificate, Alex James Riverside, born March 15, 1993, to Catherine Riverside and James Riverside in Hartford, Connecticut. A copy of the accident report from the Connecticut State Police. Single-car collision on Route 84, wet conditions, both parents deceased at the scene, minor child transported to Hartford Hospital with minor injuries. The adoption decree from New York Family Court, dated April 12, 2000. Alex James Riverside is hereby adopted by Thomas Edward Harmon and shall henceforth be known as Alex James Harmon. There were a few photos. My mother, young and smiling, holding me as a baby. My father, tall with dark hair, looking serious in a suit. A clipping from the Hartford Courant about the accident. 2 paragraphs describing the tragedy, mentioning that James Riverside had been a financial analyst and Catherine Riverside a schoolteacher. Nothing about assets. Nothing about family wealth. I was about to close the folder when I noticed a small sealed envelope tucked behind the photos. It was addressed to me in handwriting I didn't recognize. For Alex, to be opened on his 18th birthday, from the estate of James Riverside. Thomas had given me this folder on my 18th birthday, but I'd been so overwhelmed with college applications and senior year stress that I'd barely glanced through it. I'd never noticed this envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed on law firm letterhead, Brenner and Sheffield, attorneys at law, Hartford, Connecticut. The letter was dated March 2011, 3 months before my 18th birthday. Dear Alex, this letter is to inform you that you are the sole beneficiary of a trust established by your biological father, James Edward Riverside, prior to his death in 1999. The trust was funded by a life insurance policy of $500,000 and has been managed by our firm as trustees for the past 12 years. The trust documents specified that the funds were to remain untouched until you reached age 25, at which point you would gain full access to the principal and all accumulated interest. As of March 2011, the trust value is approximately $890,000. Per the terms of the trust, you will be contacted by our firm on your 25th birthday with instructions for accessing these funds. If you have any questions before that date, please contact our office. Sincerely, Robert Sheffield, Senior Partner, Brenner and Sheffield. I read the letter 4 times. My 25th birthday had been in 2018, 6 years ago. I'd never been contacted by Brenner and Sheffield. I'd never received any information about a trust. I pulled out my laptop and searched for the law firm. Their website showed they were still in practice, still located in Hartford, now called Sheffield and Associates after a restructuring. I looked at the clock. 12:34 a.m. I called Linda Kowalski back. She answered immediately. Did you find something? My biological father set up a trust for me. $500,000 in life insurance, supposed to be accessible when I turned 25. I never received it. How much was it worth in 2011? $890,000. Linda's sharp intake of breath was audible. Alex, with 12 more years of growth and compound interest, assuming even conservative management, that trust could be worth anywhere from $2 to $3 million now, possibly more if it was invested aggressively. I never got contacted. I never knew. Who were the trustees? A law firm in Hartford, Brenner and Sheffield, now Sheffield and Associates. Tomorrow morning, first thing, you call that firm. You demand to know the status of the trust. You get copies of all documentation, all statements, all correspondence. If they failed to contact you, that's potentially a breach of fiduciary duty. I spent the rest of the night researching. Found the firm's contact information, drafted an email to send at 9 a.m. when they opened, gathered all my identification documents. At 7:15 a.m., I called the firm's main number. A receptionist answered. Sheffield and Associates, how may I direct your call? I need to speak with someone about a trust established in 1999 for Alex Riverside. I'm the beneficiary. One moment, please. I was transferred to a senior associate named Patricia Wells, who listened to my explanation and then asked me to hold. 3 minutes later, a man's voice came on the line. Mr. Harmon, this is Robert Sheffield. I'm sorry for the delay. I was reviewing your file. Can you confirm your date of birth and social security number? I did. There was a long pause. Mr. Harmon, I need to apologize. There's been a significant error in our record keeping. The trust established by your father, James Riverside, has been actively managed since 1999, but our firm failed to contact you on your 25th birthday as required by the trust documents. This is entirely our fault. What's the current value of the trust? Another pause. As of this morning, the trust is valued at $3,847,392.18. The number hit me like a physical blow. Nearly $4 million. Yes, sir. The initial $500,000 was invested according to the trust's directives in a diversified portfolio of equities and bonds. The growth has been substantial over 25 years. Why wasn't I contacted 6 years ago? Sheffield's voice was heavy with regret. The attorney who handled your case, Margaret Chen, retired in 2016. There was a transition in her client files. And somehow your trust fell through the cracks. It's inexcusable. Our firm takes full responsibility, and we're prepared to discuss compensation for this oversight. I was too stunned to be angry. I need all the documentation, immediately. I'll have everything couriered to you today. Mr. Harmon, there's something else you should know. The trust documents contain a provision that was apparently added by your father shortly before his death. He specified that if you didn't claim the trust by age 30, the funds would be used to establish a scholarship foundation in your mother's name. You're 31 now. We were actually in the process of initiating that transfer when you called. You were about to give away my inheritance? The trust terms were very specific. However, given our failure to contact you properly, we would have certainly contested that provision in court on your behalf. The good news is that you've now claimed it. So the funds are yours. I'll need you to complete some paperwork, verify your identity, and provide banking information. We can have the funds transferred to you within 5 business days. I thought about Diane, about the will reading in 3 days, about her certainty that I'd get nothing. Mr. Sheffield, I need this done faster than 5 days. Is there any way to expedite? How fast do you need it? By Friday morning. That's aggressive, but possible if you can provide all required documentation today. I'll personally oversee the transfer. I spent the next hour on the phone and email with Sheffield's office, uploading documents, signing forms, authorizing the transfer. By 11 a.m., everything was completed. Robert Sheffield called me one final time. Mr. Harmon, the funds will be in your designated account by 9 a.m. Friday morning. I've also prepared a letter documenting the trust, its value, and the transfer, in case you need proof for any reason. Again, I apologize for our firm's oversight. Mr. Sheffield, I actually need to thank you. If you'd contacted me 6 years ago, I would have had nearly $4 million, but I wouldn't have learned who my family really is. Sometimes timing is everything. He paused. I'm not sure I understand, but I'm glad we could finally make this right. Good luck, Mr. Harmon. I hung up and called Linda Kowalski. I just inherited $3.8 million from my biological father's trust. Jesus, Alex. It'll be in my account Friday morning, same day as the will reading. That's poetic. So whatever happens with Thomas's estate, you're financially independent. Exactly. Linda, I need you to do something else. I need you to attend the will reading with me Friday. As your legal representation? Yes. And I need you to bring documentation of the trust, proof of the transfer, everything. I want it ready to present if needed. You're planning to make a statement. I'm planning to tell the truth. If Diane thinks she can cut me out of Thomas's estate because I was adopted, she's about to learn that chosen family matters more than biology. And if Thomas actually did exclude me from his will, I'm about to learn that I never needed his money anyway. Linda was quiet for a moment. Alex, before you do this, you should know that revealing you have money could make you a target. Diane and her children might try to contest the trust, claim you manipulated Thomas, create legal problems. Let them try. I have recordings of them plotting to defraud me. I have documentation of everything. Let them come. Friday morning at 9:15 a.m., I received a bank notification. Wire transfer received. Amount, $3,847,392.18. I was sitting in my car outside Gerard Whitmore's law office in Midtown Manhattan, wearing the same Tom Ford suit I'd worn to Thomas's funeral, checking my phone one last time before going inside. Linda Kowalski pulled up in her Tesla at 9:42 a.m., carrying a leather briefcase and wearing a navy suit that screamed competent attorney. Ready? She asked. Born ready. We walked into the office together. The receptionist directed us to a conference room on the 14th floor. When we entered, Diane was already there, sitting at the head of a long mahogany table with Kyle on her right and Natalie on her left. They all turned to look at me. Diane's eyes widened when she saw Linda. Alex, who is this? Linda Kowalski, my attorney. She's here to represent my interests during the reading. Diane's composure flickered. That's not necessary. This is just a formality. Then you won't mind her presence. Gerard Whitmore entered at exactly 10 a.m., a silver-haired man in his 60s wearing a three-piece suit and carrying a leather folder. He shook hands with everyone, his expression professionally neutral. Thank you all for coming. I'm Gerard Whitmore, and I was Thomas Harmon's estate attorney for the past 8 years. We're here today for the formal reading of Mr. Harmon's last will and testament, executed in March 2022 and filed with the New York Probate Court on Monday. He opened the folder and pulled out a bound document. Before we begin, I want to note that Ms. Kowalski's presence is perfectly appropriate. Beneficiaries have the right to legal representation during will readings. Diane's jaw tightened. Whitmore began reading. I, Thomas Edward Harmon, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. I revoke all previous wills and codicils. I appoint Gerard Whitmore as executor of my estate. The formal language continued for several minutes. Debts to be paid, funeral expenses, charitable donations. Then Whitmore reached the distribution section. To my wife, Diane Harmon, I leave the sum of $2 million and the right to remain in the family home for a period of 1 year following my death, after which the property shall be sold and proceeds distributed according to the terms below. Diane sat up straighter. $2 million was less than she'd expected, but still substantial. To my stepson, Kyle Richardson, I leave the sum of $100,000. Kyle's face went blank. 100,000, not millions. To my stepdaughter, Natalie Richardson, I leave the sum of $100,000. Natalie's mouth opened slightly. Whitmore continued, his voice steady. The remainder of my estate, including all real property, investment accounts, retirement funds, personal property, art collection, vehicles, and any other assets not specifically mentioned above, I leave in its entirety to my son, Alex James Harmon. The silence in the room was absolute. Diane's face had gone white. Kyle stared at the table. Natalie looked like she'd been slapped. Whitmore kept reading. It is my express wish that Alex understand the depth of my love for him. He is my son in every way that matters. Adoption is not a limitation, but a choice, a deliberate decision to build family through love rather than biology. I chose Alex. I would choose him again every day. Everything I built for him. He has earned it through his character, his intelligence, and his integrity. Diane, Kyle, and Natalie, I have provided for you generously. But you are not my children. You are my wife and her children, and I have fulfilled my obligations to you accordingly. To Alex, if you're reading this, I'm sorry I didn't tell you while I was alive. I'm sorry I let Diane make you feel like a guest in your own home. I was weak, and I prioritized peace over truth. I hope you can forgive me. The house in Westchester is yours. The house in the Hamptons is yours. Every investment, every account, every asset I spent 40 years building is yours. Use it well. Make me proud. I already am. Love, Dad. Diane exploded. Actually exploded. She stood up so fast her chair fell backward, her voice rising to a shriek. This is fraud. That will is forged. Thomas would never have done this. Whitmore remained calm. Mrs. Harmon, I assure you this will is legitimate. Mr. Harmon executed it in my presence along with 2 witnesses. It was notarized. It's completely valid under New York law. He was manipulated. Alex poisoned him against us. I spoke for the first time, my voice quiet and level. Diane, I haven't lived in New York for 8 years. I saw Thomas 4 times a year. How exactly did I manipulate him? She whirled on me. You're a conniving little bastard. You wormed your way into his life, played the victim, made him feel guilty. Actually, Linda interjected smoothly, my client did none of those things. But we do have evidence of someone attempting to manipulate an estate. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. This is a transcript of a conversation recorded on the morning of Thomas Harmon's funeral. In it, Mrs. Harmon discusses her plan to exclude Alex from the estate on the grounds that he was adopted and therefore not a real family member. Diane's face went from white to red. You recorded us? I recorded you, I said. In a house that, according to this will, I now own. In my own property, I can record whatever I want. Kyle stood up. This is insane. Dad promised us. He promised we'd be taken care of. You were taken care of, I said. $100,000 each. That's more than most people inherit. But you wanted millions. You wanted everything. You wanted to erase me because I wasn't blood. Natalie was crying now. This isn't fair. We lived with him. We were his family. No, I said quietly. You lived in his house. You spent his money. You took advantage of his generosity. But you never loved him. You loved what he could give you. Whitmore cleared his throat. If there are no further questions about the will itself, I need to move on to the final distribution numbers. Mr. Harmon's estate, after taxes, debts, and specific bequests, is valued at approximately $13,847,000. Mrs. Harmon will receive her $2 million. Kyle and Natalie will each receive $100,000. The remaining $11,447,000, plus all real property and personal assets, will transfer to Alex Harmon upon completion of probate. Diane grabbed her purse. I'm contesting this. I'm getting my own attorney. This will won't stand. Linda smiled. You're certainly entitled to contest, Mrs. Harmon. But I should warn you that will contests in New York have a very high burden of proof. You'd need to demonstrate either that Thomas lacked testamentary capacity when he executed the will, which would be difficult since he was examined by his physician 2 weeks before signing and found to be in perfect mental health, or that Alex exercised undue influence, which would be impossible to prove given that he lived in another state and had minimal contact. Additionally, if you contest and lose, the court can award fees and costs to the estate, which would reduce your inheritance. Diane's hand was shaking. He was my husband. For 12 years, I said. He was my father for 24. Do the math. She left without another word, Kyle and Natalie trailing behind her. I heard Natalie sobbing in the hallway. Kyle was on his phone, probably already calling attorneys. The door slammed. Whitmore looked at me. That went about as well as could be expected. She's really going to contest? Probably. People do when they feel cheated, even when they have no legal grounds. But Ms. Kowalski is right. She won't win. Thomas was very clear in his intentions, and he specifically anticipated this scenario. What do you mean? Whitmore pulled out another document. Thomas came to me in March 2022, about a year after you made partner at your firm. He said he'd realized something watching you succeed on your own. He said you didn't need his money, but you deserved it anyway. He said Diane and her children had been pressuring him for years about their inheritance, making comments about how they'd divide everything when he was gone, treating his assets like their future ATM. He was disgusted. So he changed his will, left them token amounts, and made sure everything went to you. Why didn't he tell me? He wanted to. He asked me if he should. I told him it was his choice, but it might spare everyone some pain if he was transparent. He said he'd think about it. Then he had the heart attack. Whitmore paused. For what it's worth, Alex, I watched Thomas for 8 years. I saw how he talked about you, how his face lit up when you called, how proud he was of everything you accomplished. You were his real son. Diane and her children were just people who lived in his house. I felt my throat tighten. Thank you. The probate process will take 6 to 8 months. During that time, Diane can remain in the house per the will's terms. After 1 year, the property will be sold unless you choose to buy out her interest early. How much would that cost? Approximately $1.4 million, her proportional share of the home's value. I'll buy her out next week. Linda raised an eyebrow. That's aggressive. I don't want her in my father's house for another year. I want her out now. Whitmore made a note. I'll draft the paperwork. If you wire the funds, I can present her with the buyout offer Monday. She'd be required to vacate within 30 days. Perfect. We left the office at 11:15 a.m. Linda and I walked to a coffee shop around the corner. She ordered an espresso, I got black coffee, and we sat by the window overlooking 6th Avenue. You okay? She asked. I just inherited $11.4 million from my adoptive father and $3.8 million from my biological father in the same week. I'm amazing. You're also orphaned and dealing with family betrayal. Yeah, I admitted. That part is less amazing. Linda pulled out her phone. I'm going to monitor the situation with Diane. If she does contest, we'll fight it. But honestly, I don't think she'll go through with it once her attorney explains the reality. And if she does? Then we present the recording of her plotting to defraud you. We show a pattern of greed and manipulation. We demonstrate that Thomas's will reflects his genuine intentions. We win. I sipped my coffee. Linda, thank you. For everything. That's what you pay me for. Although with your new net worth, I might need to increase my hourly rate. We both smiled. It felt good to smile. The buyout offer was presented to Diane on Monday morning. According to Whitmore, she stared at the paperwork for a full minute before signing without a word. The funds transferred that afternoon. By Wednesday, moving trucks were at the house. Diane was relocating to a condo in White Plains, paid for with her $2 million inheritance. Kyle and Natalie were both radio silent, probably dealing with the reality that their expected windfall had evaporated. I drove to the house in Westchester on Thursday morning, arriving at 9:30 a.m. to find it empty. Diane had taken her furniture, her clothes, her personal items. She'd left everything else. Thomas's furniture, his books, his art collection, the photos on his desk, including the ones of me. I walked through the rooms, slowly, remembering. The living room where Thomas used to read legal briefs on Sunday mornings. The kitchen where he taught me to make scrambled eggs when I was 8. The study where we'd played chess, where he'd patiently explained strategy while I learned to think 3 moves ahead. The bedroom that used to be mine, now empty, except for the built-in bookshelf Thomas had installed when I was 12, so I'd have space for my growing collection. I found a box in Thomas's closet, tucked behind his suits. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Letters I'd written to Thomas over the years. Thank you notes for birthday gifts, updates from college, postcards from conferences, a long letter from graduate school where I'd thanked him for believing in me when foster care had labeled me a problem child. He'd kept every single one. At the bottom of the box was a journal, leather-bound and worn. I opened it. Thomas's handwriting filled the pages. It was a diary of sorts, dated entries from 2000 to 2024, documenting his thoughts about fatherhood, about me, about his marriage to Diane. I sat on the bedroom floor and read. March 2000. Brought Alex home today. He barely spoke, just clutched a stuffed dog and watched everything with those serious eyes. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to try. He deserves someone to try. June 2008. Alex graduated 8th grade today, valedictorian. I cried during his speech. He thanked me in front of everyone, said I saved his life. He saved mine. November 2011. Married Diane. I hope I'm making the right choice. Alex seemed happy for me, but I could tell he felt displaced. I need to make sure he knows nothing has changed. He's still my son. He'll always be my son. May 2015. Alex made partner. Called to tell me the news. So excited. Meanwhile, Kyle failed another semester and asked for more money. The contrast is stark. I chose well when I adopted Alex. I chose wrong when I married Diane. January 2022. Diane made a comment at dinner about how the house should go to Kyle when I die because real children deserve their inheritance. I said nothing. But I called Gerard tomorrow. Time to make sure my will reflects reality. Alex is my real child. Kyle and Natalie are strangers who live in my house. The final entry was dated 3 days before Thomas died. Called Alex on Sunday. He sounded tired, said work was intense. I wanted to tell him about the will, about how I've left him everything, about how proud I am. But I didn't. I should have. I'll tell him at Christmas. I'll sit him down and explain that he's my legacy, my pride, my son. I'll make sure he knows. I have time. Except he didn't have time. I sat in the empty house holding my father's journal, crying for the first time since he died. Crying for lost chances, for words unsaid, for a relationship that had been real and deep and complicated and genuine, even when I doubted it. 3 months after the will reading, Diane officially dropped her contest. Her attorney had advised her that she had no case and that pursuing it would only deplete her inheritance in legal fees. I received a letter from Whitmore confirming the estate was settling without challenge. The Westchester house was fully mine. The Hamptons property was mine. The investment portfolio was mine. The retirement accounts, the art collection, the vintage watches Thomas had collected, all mine. I sold the Westchester house for $2.9 million. Couldn't live there. Too many memories. Too much history. Kept the Hamptons house as a weekend retreat. Moved the art collection to a storage facility in Boston. Used some of Thomas's money to establish the Thomas Harmon Scholarship for Foster Youth at MIT. Full rides for kids aging out of the system, giving them the same chance Thomas had given me. The scholarship's first recipient was a 17-year-old girl named Sophie, who'd been in foster care for 6 years and wanted to study engineering. At the award ceremony, she hugged me and said, "This is going to change my life." I thought about Thomas, about how he'd changed mine. That's the idea. Kyle reached out through Facebook 9 months after the will reading. His message said, "Hey Alex, I know things got ugly, but I wanted to apologize. You were right. We took advantage of Thomas. We treated you like you didn't matter. I'm sorry. I hope someday we can talk." I read the message 3 times, thought about responding, ultimately deleted it. Some bridges burn for a reason. Natalie never contacted me. According to mutual acquaintances, she got married and moved to California, using her inheritance as a down payment on a house in San Diego, living a normal life, away from the wreckage. Diane tried one more time, about a year after everything settled. She called my office number, somehow got through to my assistant, left a voicemail. "Alex, it's Diane. I know you hate me. I don't blame you. But I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not for contesting the will, I had a right to try. But for how I treated you all those years. For making you feel like you didn't belong. Thomas loved you more than he loved me. And I couldn't accept that. I was jealous of a relationship I could never have with him. That's my failing, not yours. I hope you're well." I saved the voicemail but never called back. Sorry is just a word. It doesn't erase 12 years of being treated like a guest in my own home. I'm 33 now. My combined net worth from both inheritances, after taxes and investment, is approximately $21 million. I still work as a forensic accountant because I love the work, love finding truth buried in numbers. I bought a brownstone in Boston's Back Bay, the kind of place Thomas would have appreciated. Classic, understated, quietly elegant. I date occasionally, but haven't found anyone serious. Trust is complicated when you've learned that family can plot to rob you, that the people who should protect you might be your biggest threat. But I'm healing. Working with a therapist, Dr. Rebecca Lansing, who specializes in adoption trauma and family estrangement. She's helping me understand that Thomas's choice to adopt me was love, not pity. That Diane's betrayal says everything about her and nothing about my worth. That chosen family is valid family, maybe more valid because it's deliberate, intentional, fought for. Last month I visited Thomas's grave for the first time since the funeral, brought flowers, sat on the grass beside his headstone. "Hey, Dad," I said. "I read your journal. I know you wanted to tell me about the will. I know you ran out of time. It's okay. I understand now. You chose me. That's the part that matters." The headstone is simple black granite. Thomas Edward Harmon, 1960 to 2024, beloved father. I'd chosen the inscription. Diane had wanted loving husband and father, but I'd vetoed it. She wasn't wrong that he was a husband, but the father part was mine. Next to Thomas's grave, there are 2 plots I purchased. One for me, eventually, and one I'm saving, just in case I find someone who becomes chosen family the way Thomas chose me. Because that's what I learned from all of this. Biology is an accident. Family is a choice. Love is intentional. And sometimes the people who should cherish you will betray you, but that doesn't mean you're unworthy of love. It means they're unworthy of you. Thomas left me $15 million. But the real inheritance was the journal, the letters, the proof that I mattered, that I was chosen, that I was loved. Diane and her children plotted to steal my inheritance because I was adopted. Instead, they lost everything because they forgot that adoption isn't about blood. It's about choosing someone and meaning it. Thomas chose me, and in the end, that choice was worth more than any estate could ever be. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.